I'm a really sentimental person, and usually around this time of the year in January, I start announcing to the family like a whole slew of like anniversaries. So guess what? This is the day that we got engaged, that we had our oral kitab, that we actually had our kitab, that we met, that I converted, that, you know, it's someone's birthday. And today is actually the 24-year anniversary of the day that I met the professor. And so it's very special for me because it actually is, you know, it was a life-changing moment. It transformed everything about the way that I understood my faith. And, you know, as I've talked about before, I converted before I met the professor. I'd been a Muslim about 10 months before that. And I've talked about, I recognize that there are people who are joining us new, so I have talked about my conversion experience in earlier halaqas, and you can find all of that on usuli.org, and I hope to continue to talk about more. It was, you know, I find myself recently thinking a lot about those early days of my conversion. And before I get serious, I just wanted to say I'm like rocking my tiger shirt. So I got some people that noticed I have tigers on my shirt, and it's meaningful because my Muslim name is Anmar, which means the tiger. So it kind of goes with my, I guess, spirit, or, you know, sometimes my red hot-bloodedness. The professor calls it my hot Chinese blood, because I'm not afraid of conflict, and I like standing up for things that I think are right, and so it's like the tiger. So anyway, so I'm rocking my shirt because I'm talking about conversion today. So, you know, I'm thinking about those early days of, you know, my conversion, because recently I've become aware of a lot of trauma and a lot of horrific experiences that young converts have been going through, especially young Muslim converts. And when I say young, I mean they're like newly converted and they don't know a whole lot. And unfortunately, because of the circumstances, they have too often than not suffered trauma at the hands of other Muslims, whether intentional or not. And oftentimes it's because of ignorance. It could be because of power dynamics, could be because of racism, or in the worst case, outright abuse. And it's something that I've been coming across recently, and it's honestly, I've been so upset by it and so emotional about it that it's something that I really wanted to talk about, because you know, there's not a whole lot that I can do to change the experiences that young converts will have when they start this journey. But I'm hoping that maybe I can share some tools and share some things that I learned very early on in my process, because I recognize what a blessing it was for me that, you know, I for the 10 months that I converted, I mean, my whole journey actually started even 2.5 years before I converted. And I recognize, looking back on these experiences, that from the time that I started being interested in Islam, all the way till the time I converted and beyond, and even up until now, everything had a touch of the divine in it. Everything had to happen in the way that it happened. And these were like incredible tests, incredible blessings, experiences that I could learn from and understand from. And I was spared a lot of the trauma that a lot of young Muslim converts are, you know, have to go through. I, you know, kind of heard different things and weird things. People, you know, were closed-minded. They were not necessarily open to my questioning, but I was not, you know, abused or hurt, you know, in the way that some people had realistically been hurt. And partly it's because when I met the professor, I had, you know, access to incredible knowledge, someone who could guide me through, you know, all of that craziness that I was witnessing at the mosque, you know, things that I would hear about what is authentically Islam, you know, all of these sort of backwards practices that are very ugly and oppressive, and, you know, things that turn people away from the mosque. But most converts don't have a place to turn and try and understand what is, you know, what is this? Why is it like this? Why do people believe that? Why do they do that? And I did, and I had, you know, an incredible blessing in that from a very early stage. And I also had something very important, which was permission, which converts often need. Permission to use your brain, permission to think about, to trust your intuition, to trust your common sense, to ask questions and to hear things and, you know, like react to them and not just be told that, no, this is Islam and you should just accept that. So I wanted to talk about some of the experiences. I wanted to flip some assumptions on, you know, what people assume about converts. I've talked about this a little bit before in my own story. But what's been really nice about the work here is that I've come across a lot of converts in, the process of doing this, these halaqas, and people who write me, and people that I communicate with. And I've learned a lot of stories, and I've told you in the past in other halaqas that I'm convinced that, it takes a divine intervention for people to convert, because seriously, it's so miraculous that anyone even converts, given our current climate, right? I mean, like, what is the worst thing if you wanted to really harm yourself or make your life difficult? You would choose to convert to Islam. I mean, seriously, so something has to happen in your experience to overcome all of those obstacles that you have. And the thing that I've noticed, I mean, I can't speak for all converts, but the converts that I've come across that, to me, are the ones that possess a special quality that can move the meter and change things for the rest of Muslims in our time. There are some observations that I've noticed. So, and I wanted to share those with you, because I think that they hopefully will shift how you think about converts. So, first of all, I've noticed that a lot of converts have a very high IQ. They're super, super smart. They're extremely well read. They have to be, because they have to have enough intelligence coming in, they have to have enough curiosity, they have to do the hard work to read and overcome what they hear in the news, what they hear from their friends, from whatever source of information they get about Muslims. They have to do a lot of reading, a lot of ingesting, and a lot of thinking to overcome those things. They are often very articulate. They ask really hard questions. They are not afraid to ask big life-changing questions about the meaning of life and about ethics and morality and all that stuff. And they demand reasonable answers. It is not enough just to, get a stupid answer. So, but, let's assume that converts are starting this journey and they're struggling with just understanding things. So aside from the high IQ, I noticed that they also have a very high emotional intelligence, emotional IQ. People understand, like there's this book that was written in 1996 about emotional intelligence, and it's about, a heightened sense of empathy and, understanding of emotions and things like that. So I've noticed that, this is the ability to sort of understand your emotions, the emotions of others, seeing how that affects the world, how you relate to people. I've noticed that people, have a very high sense of that. They're often also extremely high achievers. They do extremely well in, other aspects of their life. And a word that I often hear is perfectionism. It's amazing. I hear converts say time and time again, I'm a perfectionist. I was a perfectionist. I know, because I am a perfectionist too. And, a lot of times it's that desire to find something better and, do something in the best way possible that sort of drives you and motivates you. And I think that the thing that is the most interesting, if we think about how do people come to start thinking about Islam, like how do they really get here? I mean, in most cases it's because something or someone failed them. They were hurt, they were disappointed, they were, in the worst case, abused. Something went awry in their life that made them think, okay, there has to be something better. There has to be something out there. And you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to find it. And they start searching, and they start questioning, and they start thinking about things. And they start on this journey, and somewhere along the line, they come across Islam. And they're interested in looking for a divine ideal. I call this like divine idealism. You become divine idealists. You start thinking about, who am I? What is my world that I live in? What would the perfect world be like? What would it consist of? How would we create it? And what would take place in that world? And then you read Islam, and you read the values, and you go, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. It's a world where people are kind, they're just, they're merciful, they're loving. They think of others. They believe in something bigger than themselves. They dedicate their life to service. They believe in, all kinds of causes. It's like, in that process, and oftentimes people will talk about, in the process of conversion, it takes a long time. For me, again, like I said, it took 2.5 years to get to the point of conversion. In that process, you are cultivating your own desire for divine idealism. You are taking the time to really, without any baggage, without having interacted with Muslims, you are just starting to understand, what does the perfect world look like? And even if I call it, what's the promised land? And how do I get there? And then you start thinking, holy cow, Muslims have the promised land. That's where we go. That they are the ones who know about kindness and justice. These are all parts of what they believe in and what they live. And if you don't know Muslims, you don't know that that may not be the case. I mean, the interesting thing, when I told the story before when I was a young convert and I called the professor, and the first thing he said to me when I told him, I was a convert is, he said, well, I'm not impressed because you're either, people who convert are either brilliant or insane. The second thing that he said to me is, well, I don't know if I should tell you the bad news about Muslims now. And I had no idea what he was talking about, because at that point I had not really met many Muslims, and I had not, I just didn't know enough. It was too new for me. But now I know, and now I can talk about it. And that's now what I want to say is that people, these converts, they cultivate that divine idealism, and then they start to assume that the Muslims have it. So, and because they have high intelligence, high emotional intelligence, and they're polite, and they're questioning, and they're open, they start thinking, okay, born Muslims, they must know all this stuff. They're Muslims. They were raised with this. They must be, they must know the rules of the game. They must, be more pious. They must be, because they've known it for so long. And so they then defer to the born Muslims. And they assume naturally that these are the people who can guide me through this process. And they're the ones who are going to know what I need. And the truth of the matter is that they don't. I mean, you go into this situation, and the other thing is that converts, they put up with a lot. Because if you know any converts, you know that the very common experience is once they convert, after the 2-second fanfare of, welcome to Islam and you're wonderful and all of this, that the Muslim community largely disappears. And that converts often find that they don't really have a place, because mosques tend to be cultural centers much more than, multicultural points of worship. And they go to the Arab mosque, they go to the Pakistani mosque, they go to, the whatever mosque, and they discover that they're not really welcome, and they're looked at with a lot of suspicion. And so, this is extremely sad. And I really believe that, when God comes and literally chooses you, and I've said before, every single convert I've met and come across like this has a story where at some point there's a divine intervention, something very specific for them that makes it clear to them, you know what, God wants you to be Muslim. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason because these people have a potential that they can fulfill. There's something special about them that, it doesn't mean that they're going to fulfill that potential. It just means that they have it, and that God is giving them the opportunity, if they want to take it, if they choose to take it, that they can become Muslim, and that if they develop that potential, then that's something that can push our whole community forward. And obviously Muslims are in the worst situation now, so we need a lot of help. And I really believe that God is sending these people and saying, you have a potential to make a difference if you so choose. So this is a window of opportunity for our community, converts. And so, think about this. You have individuals that have all kinds of skills and all kinds of whatever, but the thing that they have in common is they are divine idealists, high IQ, high emotional IQ, high achievers, perfectionists, people who are ready. Like when I started this 28 years ago, I was a divine idealist. I was ready. I wanted to do anything that I could to join this club. I wanted, I was a perfectionist, I was ready to give up my old life. And, seriously, the other thing is that converts, I think, value that divine ideal, the idea of the divine ideal, more than anything else. Because think about it, what would you love more to the point that you are willing to defy your friends and your family and give up all your creature comforts and just completely jump into something that you don't really even know where it's going to take you. But because you believe in the promise of this divine ideal, you decide you want to do that. So I was ready to join this club, and so many do. But what do we as Muslims do to these groups of divine idealists? They come to the mosque and we tell them, take your intellect and we shove it in a box. Stop asking questions. Stop thinking big. Think small. You need to be worried about the details. You need to be worried about how do you wear your scarf? How do you, what is halal and haram about your nail polish, about the way, the length of your beard, whatever, all of the little details. And you think about, these are people who are looking for, they are looking up to the sky and thinking big. They come to the mosque and they're told, shove it in the box and shut up. And, and so many people, turn away. I mean, converts, they put up a lot with a lot. They're learning a lot. They're like, I've heard so many stories recently about, women converts. This is, especially for me, it's like I don't wear hijab, and people have asked me, why do I not wear hijab? And of course, I can tell and I'll tell a story another time. But for me, it's an issue of modesty, and for me, I don't believe that every woman on the planet should wear a scarf. That's not what God intended. But if it makes you feel closer to God, okay, that's between you and your God. From my reading, from my knowledge, from my questioning, maybe I should tell this story. So this was one of the first burning questions that I had when I met the professor. So when we met, the professor lived in, if you have read The Search for Beauty in Islam, he says, in a small apartment outside of Princeton, New Jersey. And it was like the one-bedroom version of this library. So if you can imagine, it's literally like the size of this room. But we had like, literally bookshelves that would just be like carving out a maze of books and things like that. And so I said to him, okay, I have to ask you the question about the hijab, because, literally within a week of converting, people were telling me, well, you need to start wearing the hijab. If you want to be a good Muslim, you have to wear hijab. So do I really have to? And so he said, okay, well, let's answer it this way. So he said, let's go into our library. And he brought me to, I don't know which book it was. I think it was over here. It's like 110 volumes, one of the magnum opuses of one of the scholars. And maybe the professor can remember who this was. But he said, okay, here is 110 volumes of this particular jurist, and he's written about everything under the sun. This is his work. How much of this 110 set do you think is dedicated to the issue of the hijab? And I was like, well, I just knew what I heard at the mosque. And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe like at least, half a volume, a volume, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, let's look it up and let's find out. So we went, picked a book, opened the thing, literally less than a paragraph. And all it said was, it would be good, it's preferred to cover in prayer. And that was literally it. Like, not much more than that. And I was like, what? And he goes, okay, you don't believe me? Let's go find another jurist. Okay, we went to another jurist, 50 volumes. Let's look it up again. Same thing. Open to the section on hijab. Same thing. You should just wear it, in prayer, in general prayer. We did that like 3 or 4 or 5 more times, and I was like, holy cow, what am I hearing at the mosque? And for me, my sense was, I had no connection to the scarf whatsoever. So for me at that point, to wear a scarf was like completely not my culture, not my thing. I was working in a corporate job. I was not going to show up the next day in a scarf. It just was not. And for me, modesty was like, okay, I can wear this, and I'm perfectly modest. And so anyway, that was a real eye-opener for me, to say the least. But so I get really angry when I start hearing these stories about what converts become the receptacle for from other born Muslims. And it makes me so angry, because just because you're born into this faith does not give you an entitlement to tell a convert anything. You have not gone through the work. You have not done the reading. You have not sacrificed your friends and your family and your public perception. You have not spent the years upon years thinking in terms of divine ideals. You have not done what it takes. It's like, saying that anyone who's just born into Christianity or born into Judaism has a right to go and tell a convert what to do. No, you don't. And the most that you should do as born Muslim is just to be loving and supportive and to help that person on their journey, because they actually could be your future. So for the advice that I would say is, number one, for converts and anyone who wants to take this path, because this is not just a closed path for converts. If you are just coming upon your Islam, you're born into a Muslim family, and maybe you weren't religious, and now you want to become religious, this path is open to you, as it is to everyone. And the first thing is cultivate and embrace that divine idealism in you, and don't let anyone compromise it, and don't let anyone tell you not to listen to your intuition, not to listen to your common sense, not to listen to your sense of beauty or intelligence or emotional intelligence. Number one, we as a faith are about truth. We are not about numbers. We're not about conversion. We are about truth. And a really beautiful hadith, or tradition, I guess, that the professor told me about early on, is that even at the end of times, if there is only one person who holds the truth, that's enough. So think about it. It doesn't matter that everyone in the mosque is telling you that you have to do something that's oppressive or ugly or, you know, whatever. You don't have to listen to that. You could be that only person that holds the truth. And that's what matters. And don't believe that born Muslims know better than you. They simply don't. Many Muslims have never read the Quran. Many Muslims have never, you know, thought anything. It's just an inheritance. It's kind of like, you know, it's like belonging to the country club that your dad bought a lifetime membership in. Just because you're in it and you know how it works doesn't mean that you have a right to be there. Because we have a fellowship of the divine. This is not a country club. This is not like a, you know, a private club or like the Trumps and the Bushes and the Clintons. You know, it's like, okay, you know, I have a lifetime membership. No, it's not like that. And that, you know, you have a potential, you have a purpose, and that you have, you know, potential to make a difference, and that you know, you should get to know yourself, know your God, know why you're here, and, you know, embrace that about you. And if, you know, if it's worth anything, that I'm giving you permission to use your brain, permission to trust in the light, not think about, you know, think about like how to be the best version of yourself. You came to this religion because you wanted to be better. You wanted to live a different life. You wanted to live a cleaner life. You wanted to have your life mean something. So why enter this faith and listen to people around you tell you all the different ways that you shouldn't trust yourself, you shouldn't listen to your intellect, that you should, you know, be in a box, you shouldn't ask questions, you know, you should do things that just fundamentally are not beautiful. The most important, you know, tool or heuristic that I can give to anyone is start out. Is this beautiful or is it ugly? Is it reasonable or is it unreasonable? Is it loving and open or is it harsh and judgmental? And those things will tell you what is authentically Islam. Forget all the other garbage. Start with the big ideas, the big thoughts, the big, beautiful values that we were given, and trust in yourself. You are reconstructing that beautiful intuition that God gave to all of us from the beginning of our life that maybe we lost somewhere along the way, but that's our path back to God, is coming closer to those beautiful initial intuitions and values that we received. So that's it. And I hope that any converts that are listening, feel free to write me if you have any questions, or you know, I would love to, one of my hopes and dreams is that we create like a network of all of these divine idealists, and that we empower them and strengthen them, help to loosen the bonds to the stupid things that they hear from people who haven't gone through the same process. So, you know, really just embrace your light, embrace your purpose, and run with it, and just do everything you can to be beautiful. So, thank you.
Thank you.